Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I am grateful for this opportunity to address the Security Council, and my remarks will consist of taking stock of the support that the international community, and more particularly MINUSMA, have provided over the past few months to the G5 Sahel Joint Force as it continued to increase its operational tempo. Since the last Security Council debate on the Sahel on the 5th of June, the fight against terrorism in the Sahel region has continued to mobilize at regional, continental, and international levels, despite the ongoing context of the COVID-19 pandemic. It takes a variety of actors to confront the daunting challenges in the region, and in this regard, we welcome the increased coordination of security players on the ground. This coordination of efforts allowed for a more visible presence of defense and security forces in the region, as well as stepped up pressure on terrorist groups. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, it is worth noting that counterterrorism efforts in the Sahel have actually intensified. Against this backdrop, the Joint Force remains a vital part of security responses to address extremist armed groups in the region, along with other cross-border challenges, including trafficking in persons, illicit goods, weapons, and drugs. Since the last report of the Secretary General, the G5 Sahel Joint Force has continued to rise in its operational strength. Joint Force units have increasingly acquired practical experience and efficiency in their operations. Operation Sama 1 ended on the 31st of July and was positively assessed, having resulted in significant losses registered on the part of terrorist armed groups. Operation Sama 2, launched on the 1st of August, is expected to last until the end of January 2021, with equally high hopes for a positive impact. Going forward, strengthening the Joint Forces police component would be an important step to not only improve oversight of our military operations, but also to link them to state building, support to justice sector and prison reform, as well as efforts on the human rights compliance framework. Admittedly, many areas still require urgent attention in order to implement the police component for the Joint Force. It remains key for partners to streamline support to the police component. Moving to the implementation of the human rights and international humanitarian law compliance framework of the Joint Force, and the human rights due diligence policy, we can say that while essential work still remains pending, the Joint Force has taken significant steps in the right direction, notably mitigation measures put in place as a result of the ongoing establishment of the compliance framework. Madam President, MINUSMA's responsive operational and logistic support to the Joint Force remain critical to the force's operations, especially in Sector Center. The provision of life support consumables by the mission has proven essential to sustain the Joint Force, notably during the rainy season. Further to the Security Council's authorization of MINUSMA to engage commercial contractors to deliver life support consumables to Joint Force contingents operating outside of the Malian territory, the mission began making appropriate arrangements to implement such support. Based on requirements identified and agreed by the G5 Sahel, MINUSMA can now advance the procurement process. Nevertheless, as outlined in successive reports of the Secretary General, the limitations of the current support model present important obstacles. Firstly, the issue of predictability of funding remains of concern. The United Nations, alongside the G5 Sahel and other partners, continue to call for a more predictable funding. The G5 Sahel Joint Force plays a critical role in the regional response to violent extremism. In this regard, it is essential that it receives the assistance it requires to carry out its mandated tasks. Moreover, while the current model relies on quarterly planning for the provision of life support consumables, the Joint Force has indicated that detailed projections of needs are a challenge in the context of dynamic operations in a frequently changing environment, and unfortunately, the current support model provides limited room for flexibility. At the request of this Council, the United Nations Secretariat will carry out an assessment of MINUSMA's support to the Joint Force under Resolution 2531 in early 2021. This assessment will not only highlight the progress made in this regard, but also challenges in implementing the enhanced support mandate. The conclusions and recommendations of this assessment will be taken into account in the 2021 second quarterly report of the Secretary General on MINUSMA. Madam President, despite encouraging progress in the operationalization of the G5 Sahel Joint Force, much more remains to be done. We should be mindful of the disastrous implications of the security situation for the rest of the African region if the situation in the Sahel is not adequately addressed. As calls for the mobilization of additional resources to support the G5 Sahel's fight against terrorism continue, so do calls for increased mobilization to tackle poverty and the unprecedented humanitarian crisis that the region currently faces. Strengthening the joint force is indeed only one aspect of the international community's support. Dans cet esprit,
in this vein, I hail the strengthened coordination mechanisms that the Coalition for the Sahel proposes setting up. These will allow all international partners to make their comparative benefits better count and to work more effectively together in development, humanitarian affairs, and protection of civilians. Given the situation in Sahel, the international community must be motivated by shared responsibility to work quickly, working together, and in a spirit of solidarity towards the populations in the region.